What's going on, YouTube? It's your boy Jeffrey Sambrowski again. Welcome to another Creepypasta reading, and today we're reading Channel 1. So let's get to it. Remember a time before television was completely digital? It wasn't that long ago, but many people seem to have forgotten about that analog signals were the standards. To the outside viewer, one may not know the difference between the two. I probably won't have known the difference myself if it wasn't for my parents' large antenna behind our house. It was the size of a car, and the space it required took a good quarter of our backyard. My dad loved television, and his job allowed him to afford whatever expense for his addiction. I remember there was a TV in every room of the house, even in my bathroom. My room was no exception. The television was an older TV cabinet, one that were built with a TV built inside and had the fake drawers. It was like originally our original living room set, but since the dad had upgraded to a 42-inch CRT, I inherited it. I guess he was tired of kicking me out of the living room when I was trying to play video games. Ironically, I never was much into television myself. It was never really interactive for my taste, and I hated someone just telling me a story. Usually the TV in my room would be on Channel 4 for my Nintendo. On rare occasions, I would turn it onto Cartoon Network or Nickelodeon when I was particularly bored with jumping on enemies, but that was about it. I was still appreciative of the set, however. I recall there was 120 channels on the dial of my TV, but the placement of these channels, it was easier to go backwards to get to these channels whenever I wanted to rather than going forwards. However, this way there were a lot of what I call ghost channels. They might be mostly shows that didn't come in quite right. I'm not exactly sure why they were there, but maybe the signal wasn't strong enough there, or maybe it had something to do with it, however, that was connected to the antenna. Most of them were just static, but you could barely hear any talking, but I could never quite make out what they were saying. Almost every ghost channel from 80 to 120 was one of these ghost channels, and I started getting actually programming at around channel 80 or so. But Nickelodeon was at 78, and Cartoon Network was not so far behind. Looking back, turning the channels this way saved at least a couple of minutes of my life, but made me feel pretty efficient as a child, even if I hear an annoying static. One of the stranger ones I heard of or discovered was called Channel 1. The dial on the television did not have the 1 labeled, so I've been told on TVs this was the U channel, but I guess it functioned the same. It went from 2 right around to 120, but there was something about an audible click in between them. This channel was always just complete static. Other ghost channels would have a actual channel trying to push through. Channel 1 wasn't a ghost channel. It was a dead channel. No sounds of talking, no pictures forming, nothing like the others, just complete static. None of the other TVs in our homes had a Channel 1. For some strange reason, I felt bad for the channel, like it was forgotten. I'm not sure why I had a strange empathy for a television channel of all things, but I always slowed down as I got closer to it, just to acknowledge it was there. I guess to call it a dead channel was wrong of me, though. Rarely there would be something on Channel 1. I remember the very first time it appeared. It was summertime and I was on vacation from school. I was watching Nickelodeon until Nick at Night came on. I wasn't really wanting to watch a grandma show, as I not so affectionately referred to the monochrome syndication that ran on the channel after dark. I was bored and not ready to sleep though, so I started to turn the dial to play a game of Super Mario Bros. 2. I was going past the channels and I noticed an old black and white program flicker through before I reached the channel 4. As I said, there'd be times where the ghost channels would have something on them, but something I'd seen in monochrome and most likely never on Channel 1. I've sworn that's why I've seen it, so I slowly turned the dial, bit by bit, until I got to the empty space, and sure enough, there was something there. I don't remember anything of the details at the time. I was fairly young and a bit confused, and my grasp on the grown-up language was pretty limited. I remember an older man, black suit and tie, reading a sheet of paper, speaking in a microphone, and fairly bland background. His voice was distinguished and educated. At first glance, it was obvious that he was a newscaster, but the things he said didn't make anything at all in sense-wise. I vaguely remember he was talking about something with World War II, and it was something about the Pearl Harbor attacks and the evacuation of civilians in areas that might be future targets. It was fairly serious, and I recall being fascinated and confused, but about 2 minutes into it, the signal faded to empty static. Whoop-de-frickin' do. Thinking about it now, I've been really creeped out about this happening, and my wonder just left me intrigued. It seems fairly normal to me since old shows run at this time, almost all the time. And I figured out why not the news as well. I figured out that Channel 1 was just an old news station that rarely would ever come in. However, because of this rare occurrence, I became fascinated with the Channel 1, and I wanted to see what else would pop up on the feed. I sat there just watching the static for an hour, but nothing happened. Disappointed and almost fallen into sleep with the white noise, I went to the bed defeated. However, that moment made me feel obsessed. Seeing that there was something else on this secret channel, I felt like I had seen something that I wasn't supposed to see, or something that no one else has seen before, if it was Channel 1's acknowledging my existence in return. When I was bored and I didn't feel like playing video games, I would turn on the TV at Channel 1 just to see if anything else would force its way through the dead static. It drove my parents crazy to have me listening to that harsh white noise most of the time. It eventually drove them to the point where they demand that I either change the channel or turn it off, threatening to take the television away if I didn't. Humorously, I remember getting the talk from my father because he thought that I stumbled onto some scrambled channel of garbage, only to find out that wasn't the case. But they never believed me that I told them what I saw, claiming this Channel 1 didn't exist. But despite these threats, I intently watched, most of the time with the sound turned down, just enough that I could hear it. The reprimands inspired me. Them telling me not to watch it, although denying its existence, only made this curiosity worse. I watched it for weeks over that summer, most times be nothing more for my efforts pay off. I recalled 4 more of these incidents of something coming up on Channel 1 after the day I remember seeing that strange newscast. These events were a week or two apart, at completely random at times of the day. Each of these only lasted for a minute or two before they faded away. The first one I saw was a cartoon of all things. Like, through this faint static, there was an image of the sun that was breathing fire on the land, causing the water to dry up and the plants to die in a cartoonish way. There was no voice acting, just a narrator that talked over from the show. I could barely hear it through the static. From what I could tell, there was a Native American village that was dying from the heat of the sun, and a Native American boy was trying to give animals water, but all that was left was a drop. Before the plot could develop any further, the whole thing just fades to static. The second time was the newsman again. This time, talk about a rather terrible story of a young person who was attacked and sadly, killed off in a park somewhere in California. But he made brief mention of the scene of how she was discovered in 2 different locations. Though the details were intentionally vague, he made mention of a police investigation, not knowing much about this murder, anything demanding that I knew anything to contact the authorities. I do remember he said something like it was like a Black Daisy murder or something like that to the effect before the scene faded to static. The third one was what seemed to be an old weather report. I remember something besides the newscaster talking about the cold weather was great for the season. He mentioned the low temperatures and snow falling. It was a very stark contrast to the humid summer heat I was dealing with. I honestly don't remember that much because I don't believe this one coming out to me at 3 o'clock in the morning. I only caught it through the static coming out and waking me up from a dream. It was Doctor Who and the Sensorities. The strange broadcast I caught, though, was rather disturbing and different from anything I had ever seen. Before then, I had seen everything I'd seen at least recognizable. What came across the last time was too frightening for my young mind. It was some older man in a nice outfit and a monocle-looking thing in his hand. I distinctly remember he spoke with a thick accent of some kind. However, the static distorted his features where I could not see any of the face. But what was worse were the creatures he was talking with. They had these distorted skulls, long faces, and slits for eyes. I don't remember seeing noses or mouths, but their skin was leathery and dark. I figured they were aliens or some sort, but but not having exposure to sci-fi, they looked like burn victims. The static was just thick enough through that I could not even make any details to relieve in the stress in my mind. As a young person, this vision scared the hell out of me so much that I remember jumping out of the bed, turning the TV off as quick as I could, and I run into my parents' bedroom, trying to explain what I saw. They didn't believe me in anything I said about Channel 1. They just played it off as static, and my eyes were just playing tricks on me, before berating me about watching Channel 1 again. Since then, I had always gone the long way around the dial. I made damn well sure I stayed away from the channel as much as possible. Fortunately, I didn't use that TV for much longer, as I had gotten a new TV for Christmas that year, as well as a Super Nintendo. Undoubtedly, they bought this for me to alleviate the issues I had with Channel 1. This TV didn't have the ghost channels, and not even a way to access Channel 1. However, this old TV was still in my room due to it being fairly useful as the desk to put the new TV on top of. Besides, that TV cabinet was roughly 600 pounds, and my parents had no desire to try to drag that thing out of my room for a long time. The TV just went unused, and Channel 1 was completely out of my mind at this point. It wasn't about 15 years later that old TV would be used again, as I inherited my dad's flat screen TV from his room as he got yet another upgrade. It was nice, but it only had composite cables, no plugs for an RF adapter. By this time, analog on TVs was being phased out for digital, for was less and less need for those coaxial cables. It didn't really bother me because every other console I had supported outside my old Nintendo, I knew that it was a composite cable option, so I never bothered investing in them. One day, I had this urge to play Super Mario Bros. 2 again for some reason. I just plugged in the TV cabinet and plugged in the Nintendo. It was simple. The old Nintendo RF adapter, as well as the antenna cable, was already in the back. I had no desire to move the heavy television to unplug it even after all these years using it as a desk. However, since my dad moved on to digital cable, the only channels that were coming in were the analog channels anyone could get. The huge antenna in our house was still functional, so the quality of the signals were fairly good. Curiosity consumed me as I browsed through the channel to see what we were still getting. After clicking some more of the 100 dead channels, there was one I needed to check. It was a good long time before I even vaguely remembered looking at it again, and I remember how creepy it was. But now I dismiss it as childlike imagination, as I told it was meant to be. So I turned on to Channel 1. At first glance, it was nothing but static, but there was something different in the static than all the other dead channels. It was hard to almost scrambled. Almost as there was a strange constant sound going through. It was hard to explain it. It sounded like someone was talking underwater, but every couple of seconds a high-pitched sound would walk in and fade, like the sound your ears make when they're ringing. I watched for a good minute, trying to make out what was going on. I could see the video so faintly through the static. In my mind's eye, it was the news reporter with the paper microphone I had seen at about a long time before. I humored at the luck of stumbling upon someone on Channel 1 that was all these years. But as I said, it was 15 years since I even looked at it. And I remember spending 2 weeks worth of time for the random 2 minutes of content, literally like in 1,000,001 odds. The signal grew stronger as it became easier to make out, and I was treated to a fuzzy image. However, the picture started to show up through. A sense of dread washed over me. It looked like the reporter, but something was wrong with his face. It looked disproportionate. His head was large, I'd say about 1.5 times the size of a human, making it look easy to see the details despite all those static. It had a shiny rubber texture to it, and it was expressionless. His lips were barely moving, and the eye socket seemed dark and empty. It was like he was wearing a cartoonish mask of himself. I was confused at the first, but then the whole thing just changed expression, this time looking angry. The mouth changed to a grit, non-existent teeth, and the burrow furrowed with a scowl. And the mouth just grew wide like a snake, unhinging its jaw, then slammed shut, and then his face turned neutral again. It just seemed wrong. It wasn't a mask or a puppet or anything. It was like someone was wearing something like skin that didn't fit, almost like a skinwalker. His movements were exaggerated, his head bobbing up and down repeatedly as he talked. It wasn't any sort of rhythm or motion, but completely sporadic. His hands were flipping through the papers in exaggerated motions as he just kept on flipping through them. On the papers, it was just scribbles that ran haphazardly across these pages. It seemed like someone was intimidating the character of the reporter, like parody or satire, as he spoke the strange, reverse glubbing and harsh static coming through. A screech that sounded like a roar of a robotic elephant came piercing through the static that caused me to freeze in shock. It was then I noticed the other proportions. His hands were dangling like skin hanging off the bone. No real muscle to it, just bending and folding it at some points. His pinky not moving at all, just dangling loosely. 2 fingers, the index and the thumb, were longer by a good inch. His limbs were unusually long, his forearms disappearing behind the desk, and his arms sloping all the way down. Even his body frame was disturbingly long, with rail-thin proportions. He looked at the camera, and you could see these strange-looking eyes just gazing underneath the mask's eyes. I realized this wasn't in completely black and white, as I could see these cyan-colored orbs behind the eyes. Like the whole studio was watched from color rather than just broadcasted in monochrome. His head suddenly twitched and shook violently, then static overtook the image. I was enthralled but frightened. I was still on dial, frozen. I wasn't sure if what I was seeing was actually happening. Maybe it was my mind playing tricks on me again. I was just seeing things that had gone through the static. I resumed, as I had forgotten to take a breath the entire time, so I took a breath. Maybe that was going on. Maybe my mind tried to reason with itself, and maybe I witnessed something that took out of context. Maybe I caught the last part of a Saturday Night Live skit. Hell, maybe if I imagined the entire thing. But just as I started to relax and changed the channel, I heard a voice that had been lost to my memory. It was a reporter. There was no image available, just static, and the voice was faint and barely intelligible from the noise. I turned up the volume up full blast to make out what he was saying. For some reason, feeling like he could explain what I just saw. His words were broken, at least a second's worth of pause between them, and the tone from one word did not match the next, as someone was using a soundboard. Even after a decade later, upon hearing it, I could still remember clearly as yesterday, through quote-unquote, "Good morning. Danger. Killing. Everyone. Earth. Time. 2029. Everyone. Evacuate. 2029. All dead. Good night." End quote. There was a loud elephant screeching roar through by complete sounding garbage. Painful ear-piercing gibberish, probably because I heard the TV on full blast to hear the faint speech. Then the signal just cut out completely. Normally there was a small fade to static, but this was a immediate feed cut. A feeling of nausea and worry overcame me, and I felt my tongue pull back into my throat. I had trouble comprehending what I just saw. My mind racing miles per second. I gripped the dial so hard that I shattered the plastic causing underneath my fingers, and I didn't realize I was bleeding. I let this channel stay on for over an hour, just to see if I could hear anything, but to no avail. Left it on for days, weeks, months. I bought a DVD recorder to record while I slept while I was at work, and for almost a year, nothing showed. And I had these nightmares of these horrible, disfigured proportioned doppelgangers of the newscaster. The entire life was consumed by this TV. I was hoping to hear anything, but despite these efforts, that was the last time I heard from that channel. My parents were there when I was still living at the time. Became concerned as they forced me to see a psychiatrist to explain it to me. He said that I had some sort of psychotic episode from stress, possibly psychosis, that my mind had made up the whole event. But not once did he reassure that I might have could have seen that actually happen. He told me to quit watching Channel 1, but I refused. He tried to put me on medication, but I refused. He eventually ordered me to take the TVs out of my room, telling me that I shouldn't be allowed to watch TV unsupervised, but again, I refused. It wasn't until my father smashed up the old TV and burned it while I was at therapy that my search was forced to stop. I spent time looking up what had happened, searching forums, doing research, anything I could. The most common explanation I got was that some of the old television waves were sent out to space, and sometimes they would come back to bounce off a planet or something. That explained why I might have seen those old news reports, but I never got a good explanation on what I saw that day. My mind was trying to wrap up around the possibilities that I found any answers than people that would have seemed crazier than I am. I've been told that it could have been aliens warning us about some asteroid coming to Earth, with the government trying to cover it up. Some people told me my TV was possessed by a spirit offering me some prophetic knowledge. Some told me it was a message from the future appearing through a wormhole of some sort. And many just told me I was lying and I was stupid. If it was like some story I wrote for attention or just to scare people. I'm not sure what I saw. I just know it could have been something. Maybe something I've seen but shouldn't have, but did. Or maybe it was something that was meant for us to see but may just neglected the unlabeled channel. A channel that was completely removed from most televisions. After that, I believe Channel 1 was trying to communicate with something to me. Every now and then, I desperately want to see what's on that channel to hear any messages that could have been out there, like some twisted obsession, but now analog televisions are a thing of the past. I couldn't even replicate the same setup anymore, and at least not without hundreds of thousands of dollars. It might be impossible now, but I just want to know if there's anything of other messages meant for us. Things that we might have missed. Thousands of minutes in my life go by, and each one containing a possible message, a warning that I might have missed, a narrative that I wanted to hear. I wonder if the change to digital was the best intentions for us. Was it because of better quality pictures and less frequency pollution? Or maybe was it something that was seeing us? Seeing our society filled with violence, murder, killing our planet? Seeing our fingerprints passing through empty space only for someone or something to pick it up light years away? Or maybe the change was to prevent us from seeing what they were sending back. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that was actually a kind of surprising creepypasta with no blood. No blood cliche there, so that's new, but it does talk about analog TV in a way on how, like, there's a lot of dead air and how there's, like, a bunch of ghost channels replicating through, the feed, and, like, that's actually really surprising that we got that for a time being. Like, this isn't one of those creepypastas that usually, like, stirs away from the blood cliche or talks about stuff without blood. Well, there's not much blood cliche except for a bleeding hand, but of course I'll let that slide. But the thing is, this is like one of those creepypastas that talks about, like, let's say, ghost channels. Like, for example, there was other things like that mentioned, like, these hint ghost channels, or like things like that were not really meant to be seen, like, for example, like Channel Infinity or the Wyoming incident, or for that matter, like the time, like, where I was asleep but my housemate John woke up to himself watching the footage of Stable 17, which I've yet to release. And yes, I still will make Stable 17. I know. I have to get to that. But anyways, what did you guys think of this creepypasta? What did you change to make it better? This is Jeffrey Sambrowski signing out.